Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this edition of our podcast. My dad is on the road, so this is a solo episode. No, I'm kidding. He's here. He's calling in. That's why the audio probably sounds a little off on his end. That's okay. We'll make do. We're figuring it out as we go along. We're being consistent with our podcast. And today's topic is about the election, the upcoming election in Texas, and of course the midterms. But just a quick overview of the election and what's coming up. So I have in front of me a sample ballot that kind of gives an idea of what exactly is on the ballot. I'm not going to go through the entire ballot because, frankly, we just don't have time. But a few things on the ballot, big ticket items. Number 1, Governor Greg Abbott, Beto O'Rourke, Mark Tippett, and Delilah Barrios. Mark is from the Libertarian Party and Delilah is from the Green Party. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Mike Collier, Democratic Party, and Shanna Steele, Libertarian Party. Attorney General Ken Paxton, Rochelle Mercedes Garza for the Democratic Party, and Mark Ashe for the Libertarian Party. And then you just go through a couple of different spots. Supreme Court justices, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 on the ballot. So very interesting. So that's the big ticket items for the people on the Texas midterm election ballot. And then election is November 8th, Tuesday, November 8th. You have to request your absentee ballot by October 28th, and you have to return ballot by mail postmarked by November 8th. And then registration deadlines for the midterms. Registration deadline for the midterm, October 11th. Okay? October 11th, that's more than a month from now. I need to do that. But, so just a quick overview of the elections coming up. All right, Dad, what we're probably going to talk about a few, we have different elements of the upcoming election that we're going to talk about. What were you wanting to talk about?
Well, 2 things. You can register online. You end up at a state site, or you can register. You can go to your local county's website and get a registration form mailed to you. At least Dallas will do that for you. I think Tarrant will do that for you also. So you want to get that done. It's September. So if that's a little over a month away, those deadlines are in place, and why wait to the last minute? Changing address. We moved this summer. Some of you who follow this podcast regularly know. I changed my address online. It takes you to a state site, and then it feeds down to the county level. So those are the follow-up, some of the basics you were talking about. The other thing is, and I thought you were going to talk about yours first, but I'll bring mine up. All the counties need poll workers. You can actually apply if you want to help. If you're concerned about elections, or you love elections, or you just want to see what it takes for people to vote, you can become a poll worker. All counties will be advertising for this soon. I think that they already are. Dallas County is going to hire people for over 400 polling locations in the county. Somewhat of a large county, large populace. So that's something that needs to be done. You can go to dallascounty.org, go to the elections, go to government tab, elections, and they'll tell you how to become a poll worker. I think that's something, if you're concerned about these elections again, or if you love them, something you can do. There'll be some training involved. You're going to work a long day that day. That's a fact. I know some people who've done it. I have not done it, but I know people who've done it. And if there's a large turnout, you can end up working till in the evening if you get that kind of shift. So, but it is an opportunity for people. And I'm sure Tarrant County, Collin County, Benton County, and wherever you are in the United States of America, your local county or parish, there is something very similar for you to do.
Right. So there are different roles for election workers. Or there's a difference between like a poll watcher, which is what I was going to talk about, and then like actual election workers. Do you know what the criteria is to be an election worker, or?
No, it's not rocket science. I'm not quite sure. You can go to the website And like I said, the website will give you more details. I looked it up. It tells you what uh, the requirements are, what you're going to do, gives you a little bit of an overview. I'm sure it's a little bit more than what's the overview. There's also a program for high school workers to get involved, which might be a great way for young children, young people about to be old enough to vote, 16, 17. Some high school people have early birthdays. They'll be
Wait,
18.
that
Can't vote.
reminds me, I actually did a story in North Carolina. Yeah, I reported a story where I talked with one of the youngest poll workers in that county and really probably in the state. And he was like someone who was like 18 or 19. And it was Greene County. So one of the Greene County election workers was someone who was 18 or 19. He was like, he used to be a Boy Scout and then, or was, I don't know if you're a Boy Scout. I guess you're a Boy Scout for life. And he had always been, Greene County #1 was a very, very small county. And their election officials are election officials. Yeah, like the people that their board of elections was very transparent. Every time I had a question, they were honest. They weren't like trying to hide anything. Not that election officials try to hide anything, but sometimes it's hard to get a straight answer from someone in government. Just a straight, like I ask a question and they're like, oh, like yeah, or oh no, or these are the issues we're having, instead of, can I send you an email 5 hours from now with an answer that's been approved by my HR manager and my boss, or So Greene County never had to give me all that kind of stuff. They always just sent me a straight answer, and they were transparent about their struggles. But I mean, yeah. So that is true. You can actually be very young and be an election worker, and I think that actually be something very cool. Now, do you know if you get paid to be an election worker? Hello, Warfield?
I didn't hear your question.
Do you know if you get paid to be an election worker?
Based on this high school program, now I just saw, I glanced at it. I didn't look at all the details behind it. I would think that, 18, it's a job. You're old enough to vote. So I think you should be able to participate in or work in it.
Since you're actually driving while we're doing this podcast. I actually just looked it up because I have a computer right in front of me. And it says election workers are paid for the days they work during the election process, but this is according to Tarrant County. So it might vary county by county. So it might vary county by county. And the person who kind of oversees like the election process, or the what do you call it? The state office that oversees it is the Secretary of State's office that oversees like all the election information. Say that again?
That's for the state. There is Secretary of State does run the state share, but now each county is responsible for setting up the actual polling places, and they have certain specific rules and protocols and laws you follow in that county for voting.
Right.
Procedurally.
Right. Now, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not right now. Go ahead and go through yours. We'll kind of do the comparison of what we're talking about.
Right. So I was going to talk about poll watchers because there's this big controversy about poll watchers. There's this whole thing going on, or that's been going on since the 2020 elections, about poll watchers have. Okay, so this is gonna be very difficult to explain on from an objective viewpoint, but I'm not sure if some of you have heard of a quote-unquote documentary called 2000 Mules. And basically, 2000 Mules has a lot of claims about what happened in the 2020 elections, basically claiming that an unnamed nonprofit organization paid Democrat-aligned quote-unquote mules to illegally collect and deposit ballots into drop boxes in the swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And so it's basically like a conspiracy theory documentary. There are a lot of these out there. This is one of the latest ones. I mean, because there's like conspiracy theory documentaries about like 9/11 and about some of the wars and basically anything having to do with like the last 5 presidents. There's been several political documentaries, conspiracy theory films made. Now, the issue with this documentary, that when I've been researching and trying to understand a little bit more about it, and I can't watch it. I've been looking at trailers, but I haven't been able to watch it. But I've been able to like read some stuff about it and do some more research on it. But basically, the issue with this documentary is that the people who have made this documentary supposedly have all this evidence to show that that the election was stolen, and that they have like this wealth of information. And then I think like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, that evidence was somehow deleted on a server, or that somehow that evidence was just like gone. Like somehow it just disappeared, and the people were like kind of like brushing over it. Anyways, so this was actually this film was screened at the Republican Party of Texas 2020 convention that happened just this past June. So anyways, so it's just this interesting political documentary about this conspiracy theory that all these mules were basically depositing ballots into drop boxes in swing states. Now they're looking ahead to the upcoming election, and they're basically trying to get people to be aware of what to watch out for. Well, I don't know if it's even be aware of what to watch out for. I don't even think they're doing any sort of like preemptive, like you should go out to the polls and be a poll watcher. Some are. So some people who have seen this documentary and who I know through just knowing different political people are encouraging people to become poll watchers. Now, poll watching is inherently partisan. Like if you are a poll watcher, you are usually working for your party that you voted for and that you support, right? That is different than being an election worker. And so I just wanted to make that distinction that between poll watchers and election workers, one is inherently partisan. You can be a Democrat and or openly say that you're a Democrat and you're a poll watcher, but you cannot be an intimidating presence when people are going out to vote. And so there was like this one example in 1981 where the Republicans were wearing, let me see if I can pull up the example, but basically it was like in 1981, the Democrats accused poll watchers dispatched by the Republican National Committee of being intimidating to voters. During that year's gubernatorial race in New Jersey, the RNC organized a group they called the National Ballot Security Task Force. Its members, some of whom are armed off-duty law enforcement officers, wore black armbands and went to predominantly minority polling places. So basically you can't show up in this huge group and be intimidating towards the people who are at that polling place. So the point of the poll watchers is to make sure that there is that transparent election process happening, and to make sure that everything that's going on is fair under the regulations and under the stipulations of whatever the election process is for that county, municipality, state, whatever. Dad, did you have any notes on that?
Well, I think I've heard about what you talked about, and I think there were some consequences for that group that did that. I don't know if there were criminal consequences, but you went pretty far back, which means that wasn't very successful in regards to becoming a regular, habitual thing that happened every election. There were some that was brought to some people's attention. I don't remember the details though, but I remember the story, So you're not going to get where people can. You talked about intimidation, and that's an interesting word. The concept of a poll watcher is to be there and kind of just make sure everything's going. Like you said, they're partisan. They're looking to make sure that everything's going the way it should. Some people will say they're intimidating because their presence may be prevent how they present themselves may be an issue. Again, you were talking about people that were wearing black armbands, calling themselves a security operation. That's a little bit intimidating to some people. When we're trying to encourage people to go to the polls, I mean, a successful democracy is a lot of people show up. Many people show up. So you don't want people being there that would prevent people from going to vote. Now, I don't think all in all, people sitting around watching people stand in line is super intimidating, but that's me. I wouldn't be intimidated by it, but others could be. So, but using words like intimidation without someone walking up and down and directly confronting people standing in line, now that would be intimidating, and that probably would be illegal in most jurisdictions in regards to voting, because you can't politic within so many feet or so many yards of a polling place anyway.
Right. So, okay. So we talked about election polling. We talked about election workers. We talked about, I don't want to get too much into that political theory documentary, because in order to successfully combat that movie, I have to go down through every argument and explain why those arguments are invalid, which is not the point of this episode. It's just a mention that if you've seen that movie before, do some more research into, first of all, the people who made it, who, whenever someone's trying to sell you something, especially because I think this movie was for $30, if someone's trying to sell you something on on something that's controversial, I would always, if you hear something in the background, that's my dog. I brought my dog with me to the studio because she's very good. Anyways, just when someone's selling you something like that, a controversial documentary for $30, I would double check to see maybe more into the documentarian and what that background is, because people make money off of controversy. I mean, that's the business.
InfoWars.
Yeah. So, but anyways, okay. So moving on. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the in terms of the poll watching. Number one, this is the 2020 election was the first time since the 1980s where there wasn't a court supervising the Republican Party doing poll watching because of that incident that happened in 1981. And there are a few updates to, I believe, poll watcher requirements. And this is from the Director of Elections. As you prepare for elections in 2022, we wish to advise you of recent changes in state law relating to poll watchers. This advisory addresses changes in the Texas Election Code. So basically, it kind of goes through there are some differences, or there are some updated training requirements for poll watchers. If you were a poll watcher in last year's, it says that the current training for poll watchers will expire on August 31st, 2022. So whatever previous training that you've had, that training has expired on August 31st. So if you are not aware of that, just be aware of that, because the election advisory goes out to election officials, not necessarily to the poll watchers themselves. And then it kind of just talks a little bit more about the different duties that a poll watcher has, and then basically your rights as a poll watcher, whether someone can remove you or not. So what we're going to do is before we wrap up, I do want to tell everyone a little interesting fact about, if we're talking about elections, about our family, and that's about Big Warfield Sr. Dad, can you tell people what Grandpa did for a living? What Big Warfield did for a living?
Big Warfield. He was heavily involved in being a background person in politics. He worked for a couple congressmen. He was campaign manager on a few campaigns. He goes far back as the late 1960s and was on Ralph Yarbrough's staff. He originally was a journalist, sports journalist, then moved over, became an editorial writer, and then moved into being a press secretary and campaign manager for a variety of candidates throughout the 60s and 70s, and then eventually he passed away at a really young age. But he was working for a congressman here in Texas as the head of the staff. I don't know the exact title, but he was basically in charge of all aspects of the congressional operations for this congressman in Washington, D.C. So he lived in D.C. for many years before he passed away.
So this the kind of topics that we're covering and the kind of stuff that we both do, because we're both involved in writing and we're both very interested in politics, literally runs in our family, because it's not only us, but there are some other journalists in your.
I don't know if you realize this, your uncle, my brother, is also running for office in a different state.
I am aware. I've seen the Facebook posts.
Okay. So, like you said, it runs in the family. He's trying to get elected to a state legislature in another state. But we're talking about Texas, so we'll back off of that for now. But to your point, my major in college was government. A lot of public policy, a lot of things of that nature. So I've had a lifelong interest in this.
Mm-hmm. And it's led to my interests as well. In high school, I wasn't so much interested in politics, but when I became a journalist, I became much more interested in politics. And so this is just our family legacy, is just making a mess of the political system. So that is all for this week's episode. I hope everyone has a good Labor Day weekend. Obviously, my parents are, because they're on the road heading off to a fun place. And I'm just going to be resting. So thank you so much. Thanks, Dad, for calling in. And we will talk to you later.